Hi, I am Lee Hall. I'm an Associate Professor of Literacy Studies at the University of North Carolina in Chapel Hill. And today I'm going to be sharing with you some experiences and understandings about learning to take live field notes. And the idea here is going to be thinking about how we use social media to share our research. So first of all, I want to start by framing this out with a quote from Tricia Wang about what live field notes are. And Tricia says, a live field note is a blog post that is intended to provide an on-location and synchronous visual and textual coverage of an instance from the ethnographer's fieldwork. I think it's a very nice quote to ground this discussion in. You don't have to be an ethnographer, right? Obviously, to take live field notes, but these bigger ideas about it's synchronous or relatively synchronous. So you're getting the notes posted almost as it's happening. There might be a little lag. We're thinking about how we communicate notes both visually and textually to communicate what we are seeing in the field. Now, what are some characteristics of live field notes? So first of all, live field notes are going to require you to have internet access. You're going to have to use a social networking service. What social networking platform you use is going to be up to you. It's going to be what makes sense for your field notes. And it doesn't have to be the same thing for the entire study. You might find on a particular day that some field notes or a particular social media platform works better than a different one on a different day. Okay, so it's not a hard and fast rule in terms of what social networking app you use, but you have to be mindful. It needs to be communicating what it is that you want it to communicate. That's really the best way to think about it, I think. You're going to obviously use images where it makes sense, and we'll talk a little bit about maintaining privacy and what that means as we go through this, because you have to always think about that. Who are you representing? What are you representing? And you have to always think about your participants' privacy and what they are and are not okay with. They're time-stamped. Now, I love that, okay, the fact that your field notes, when they go live, they always have the date and the time on them. I would always keep that feature on the app. I would never turn that off because it tells, first of all, it tells you as a researcher, right, when it happened, which is always great to remember. But it also tells, of course, the people that are reading your field notes when it took place, or approximately when it took place, right? Your field notes are always 100% public. Now, of course, there might be some things that you don't share. You don't need to share everything, right? Some details people just don't need to read. They're just not that interesting. Maybe you wrote something down because you thought it would be interesting, but you're not really sure. You took a lot of copious notes on something. You don't have to share every single thing that you wrote, but the idea is that, you're going to make it 100% public via the internet, right? You're not keeping anything from us that we really need to know in order to understand your study, but at the same time, you're also balancing privacy needs. Images will contain some text too. So I always, when I use images, put a sentence or two with it. So it's not just images. I make sure I have some words to go along and contextualize what it is that people are seeing and to help my audience understand what it is that they're seeing. And then finally, the other thing to remember here is that using live field notes does not replace traditional field note taking. So it's not like all of a sudden I'm taking my field notes on Twitter and I'm not having to write anything in a notebook or on a laptop anymore. Traditional field note taking still happens. It happens alongside sharing your field notes over social media. So let's think a little bit about what this looks like in terms of just the basics in getting launched. First, obviously, you have your research questions, and you have to think about what information is it that you're going to be collecting based on your research questions. And then identify some good apps for sharing your data. Think about what makes sense, okay? Don't think about what app you like. I mean, maybe think about that, but don't get hung up on, well, I really like this particular app. I'm going to force it into my study here. Don't do that. Think about what app is going to serve your communication needs the best, okay? And then, of course, like I said earlier, identifying some good apps is just a starting point. You should absolutely refine as needed. Now, when you get to taking your field notes, when you've never done this before, and I've been taking, when I started doing live field notes, I mean, I'd been a researcher for 15 or 16 years, and I was used to taking field notes either by hand or on a laptop. I had a lot of experience with that. So what I did, I was doing observational field notes, was I started off with my laptop and a notebook and a tablet and my cell phone. I had all of that stuff with me. And I started off by taking my notes normally at first. And when I say normally, I mean on a piece of paper or on my laptop, right? I didn't start by just live field noting. And then what I did was, when there was sort of a lull and there wasn't a lot going on, then I looked for some interesting things in my field notes and I pushed them out chronologically. I pushed them out. And that's how I got started. And you can see I have a screenshot here from one of my field notes. And then here is another screenshot here where you can see I'm using both Twitter and Instagram. And really, like, I needed something that would allow me to take pictures, so Instagram worked. But I also wanted to use Twitter. And I was using Twitter when there weren't any visuals, because Instagram, the nice thing is, if I put something on Instagram, I can still write it up like Twitter, and then I can have Instagram automatically push it to Twitter as well. So it's going out in both places. So stuff with images went on Instagram and Twitter. Things with only text went just on Twitter. Now, what I found is, like, over time, I got a lot better at being able to take live field notes, and then actually live field notes was taking the place of, I was doing more live field noting and less physical writing in a laptop or in my notebook. But what I found is that there would be these times when I had a lot to say, and so that's when I would switch over to my notebook or switch over to a laptop, right, and just write really quickly all the things that I needed to get down so I didn't lose them. And then I would go back over to live field noting. But what happens then is you've got notes all over the place, right? So I have stuff that is only on Twitter. I have notes that are on Instagram and Twitter. And then I have things that I've got captured in a notebook or on my laptop, right? And what the heck am I going to do with all this stuff? Because it's spread out over 3-4 different places. And that's not good as a researcher. I need to bring it all together. And I can't wait until the end of the study to bring it all together, because I'm not going to be able to remember what the heck was going on, okay? So here's what I did. And this worked very well for me, and this is my recommendation for you. Within 48 hours of completing the observation, I recommend you storify your live field notes. So you can go into Storify, you can use your hashtag. So you're going to have a hashtag that is for the entire study. So I might use multiple hashtags, but for this particular example that I've been drawing on here, I always use the hashtag tech teaching. So I would go into Storify and I would pull up hashtag tech teaching, and it would show, right, all the stuff. I forget how long Storify does it, like within the last 2 or 3 weeks, right? And then I would pull my tweets over, right, into Storify. And of course, you can put them in any order that you want. So do it in an order that makes sense to you. And then you can always add in more information. So in Storify, what I was able to do is I could pull in a tweet or a photograph. And then let's say I had written a lot of information in my notebook about a photograph that I had. So then I could look at my notebook and I could take that information and transfer it into Storify, because Storify will allow for me to enter large blocks of text. So now what I have is I have all of my tweets, all of my pictures, and any additional notes that I need organized in one place in the order that I want them in. Perfect. You can publish your Storify, and I did, because this is another example in a way of live field noting, right? So at first, you're getting my field notes, right, these sort of bits and bytes. You're getting them as tweets, excuse me, you're getting them in Instagram with some text around it. But there's always these points where I have a lot of notes I have to write down, and I can't be tweeting them all out, right? So they come out to you via Storify. At the end of the day, everything comes out to you via Storify. And then I have a site on Medium where I write reflections on my field notes for the day. So again, within that 48 hours, I'm storifying everything, but then I'm going over into Medium and I'm writing, it is a reflection. It is not meant to say, here is, these are the things that I found. It's more like, here's what I noticed, here's questions that I have. And we can see some examples of this So let's take a minute. This is an example from Storify. This is called Tablets and Scribes, Boys More Likely to be in Charge of Technology. And this was in a middle school classroom. The very first day, okay? So you can see I put that up there. First day of new research project, excited to start with live field noting. And I'm going to click on this real quick, right? So this will take you to a larger collection of my work. Okay, so you can see here, right, I've got a tweet. I've got my hashtag tech teaching. I've also got an additional one. And then it tells you, right, that the principal said, hey, why don't you start with the 6th grade science class? And I give you a little bit of information about that. And I show you, you know, here's a picture of what's going on that day or for the week. Here's an overview. It's January. You can see the timestamp down here, January 27, 2016 at 10:02. Hopefully snow days don't mess up because I think we probably had some at that point. So anyways, you can see as you go through here what this looks like. And you can see I'm taking pictures, but you can also see I'm not taking pictures of students. You might see some shoes. At some point you might see some arms or a hand, but you're not going to see any faces or identifying markers of kids. And I've got different, paragraphs here going on explaining what it is that you're seeing. Okay, so that's how I use Storify. Let's take a look at Medium for a minute. So this is from February 25th, and it doesn't line up one-to-one with the Tablets and Scribes because Tablets and Scribes was my first day at Storify. That was my very first day, and I didn't quite know what I was doing. So after I did the Tablets and Scribes observation, I came home and I thought, oh my gosh, what am I going to do? I have all this information and it's scattered everywhere. So it took me a little bit to refine this and get it worked out. But on Storify here, you know, what you can see is I am just writing about what I think is happening, right? I've only done 4 observations across 2 classrooms. I'm starting to notice a pretty depressing pattern. Again, it's only 4 observations. This is probably like at best 8 to 10 hours worth of observations. But I am noticing a pattern, and so I want to make note of that, and it's in my records. I'm not saying that the pattern's going to hold up. I'm not saying it's a finding, but I'm just saying this is something that stands out to me. And so I make note of it here in Medium, and I start talking about what I am noticing. I start telling you, here's something I saw, and then I start telling you, here's the interpretation that I'm making off of it. I incorporate some pictures in here as it makes sense to do so. You can sort of see how this is structured. Not all of them are structured this way in terms of like, here's what I noticed and here's my interpretation. I don't think they have to follow any particular format, but this is just what I notice. So, and then I sort of sum it up. And it's not terribly long. It's just meant to sort of keep me on track with my thinking. All right. So a few things to remember here. You have to respect the privacy of your participants and community. And so if I go down to the very last point, I have always turn off your location or make it general. So like, I think mine might have said Raleigh, North Carolina. But what I noticed was that because I was in middle school, if I hadn't turned off my location, it would have stamped the name of the school on there. And that, I don't want that, right? We don't need to know what school I'm in and who I'm talking about. So think about that. Pay attention to location services when you are pushing out live field notes. Check that before you start. And always think about, you know, when you're taking pictures, do you have the right to take a picture of a person and post it to social media? And probably the answer to that is no, you do not in most circumstances, okay? Always ask permission before taking a picture. Even though my pictures are things of like student work, or they're pictures of what they're doing online. They're not pictures of the students themselves. I never just walked up and took a picture unless I explicitly have permission. And so I might say things like, hey, can I take a picture of the work that you're doing? You know, can you show me how this works and let me take a picture or a video? Always ask permission. And of course, never share photos that are revealing identity, particularly when working with minors. and don't use anyone's real names, obviously, right? And that goes for the location as well. All right, so that concludes my overview here of taking life field notes. I have found it personally to be extremely rewarding, exciting, fun, a different way to think about how I take field notes. It's, I think, allowed me to broaden and expand what I do because now I'm incorporating pictures, and I wasn't doing that before. And also, I'm doing reflections after every observation, and I wasn't doing that before. So I think life field notes, even though it can generate a higher volume of stuff that you have to manage, I think it's actually allowed me to be much more organized and much more reflective, and really helped me to dig into my research in ways that I don't or that I didn't using traditional methods. It's not that I couldn't have done these things using traditional methods, it's just that I didn't. And so this has been a really good opportunity for me.